Hey everyone! So I recently posted my Johto Region review not too long ago, and if you haven't seen those videos, you might check them out as they will provide some context for this video. All in all, Johto is a fantastic region, and I really love playing through it and getting the cozy vibes and enjoying the relaxation that I get whenever I play through the Johto games. And while Johto did score particularly well in the review, it isn't without its flaws. So today I will be addressing my issues that I have with Johto and suggesting ways that the region could be repaired to receive a perfect score of a 5 out of 5 review score from me. So this video kicks off a new series that I have appropriately named Region Repair. So stay tuned to see how I repair the region of Johto. I'm Sabrina and you're watching Saffron City TV. Welcome back everyone. Like I said, I really love the region of Johto, but I have some problems with the region. It's not perfect. And though the issues that I have with it are kind of few and far between, I really do think that with some minor repairs, Johto could easily get a perfect 5 out of 5 score. And I think this is the case for both Gen 2 and Gen 4. Look at that, I'm just over here rhyming away by accident. Obviously, the categories that have already received a score of 5 won't require any fixing, so I'm not going to discuss those. Anyway, let's revisit the review category by category and make some repairs. First things first, we should address region design and biome diversity. I really like the way the region was designed and the layout is great. I don't have any issues with it. But where Johto suffers in this category is in the biome diversity. In Gen 2, more small patches of water could have been added to a few of the routes to potentially resemble something like a swamp or marshland. In addition, there are tile sets that include ice and snow for the ice path, and I think that if some of the tiles were added to the tile set for the nearby Blackthorn City, you could have it appear similar to snow. While Blackthorn might not be at the same altitude as Mount Silver, it is still nestled within a mountain range at the northern part of the region, and I would assume that if Johto were a real place, Mount Silver wouldn't be the only mountain within that range to receive snow. I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume that it could snow in Blackthorn, and had it been incorporated into its design for both Gen 2 and Gen 4, it would have helped the biome diversity score. In addition, Gen 4 already has available tile sets for swamps, marshlands, and wetlands that were used for the Safari Zone. I think Route 43 south of the Lake of Rage, or even Route 34 south of Goldenrod could be made to look more like a swamp, marshland, or wetlands. Just these few additional biomes would definitely bring up the score for the region design and biome diversity to a perfect 5. Next, let's talk about town and city design and aesthetic. The main issue that I have with the cities and towns of Johto is that interesting things to do or sites or fun experiences that you can have in the cities and towns are poorly distributed amongst them. This issue is more apparent in Gen 2 than it is in Gen 4, so both could use some improvement. In the review, I suggested a couple of ideas that could improve their scores for this category that I'll touch upon here. The main cities and towns that I think deserve the most repair would be Cherry Grove City, Cyanwood City, Mahogany Town, and Blackthorn City. First things first, I think that the flower shop in Goldenrod should be moved to Cherry Grove. But if we do that, how are we going to tackle the Sudowoodo blocking our path to Ecruteak? Well, we could just have the daughter of the flower shop owner give the player the squirt bottle near the Sudowoodo after defeating Whitney. That way the player wouldn't have to backtrack to the flower shop. However, after the player dispatches the Sudowoodo, if they wanted to revisit the flower shop in Gen 4 to obtain the berry pots and mulch, luckily Cherry Grove isn't that far away from Route 36. This would give players a reason to revisit Cherry Grove, Plus, this place is known for its beautiful flowers. I think it makes sense to have the flower shop here. Furthermore, Gen 2 could also give players an incentive to revisit Cherry Grove by having the flower shop sell different berries on different days, and maybe they could even purchase berries from the player at a higher price than the Pokemarts would. Maybe we could even have the flower shop owner allow you to water her plants with the squirt bottle once a day in exchange for some quick cash or even apricorns. I don't know, y'all comment down below if this would incentivize you to revisit Cherry Grove. Cyanwood City could use some excitement as well. Similar to the bug catching contest in National Park, I think Cyanwood could hold a fishing tourney on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Instead of park balls or sport balls, the contest could use exclusively lure balls provided by Kurt. The Pokemon available in the contest should be Magikarp, Gyarados, Horsea, Seadra, Chinchou, Lantern, Corsola, Remoraid, Octillery, Mantine, and maybe only a 1% chance to encounter a Kingdra, and that could be its own little special prize for trainers who want a Kingdra but can't trade to get one. The levels of the Pokemon could be similar to the bug catching contest as well, with the pre-evolved Pokemon being found at higher levels and the stronger or evolved Pokemon being found at lower levels. Whichever contestant catches the strongest fish Pokemon could win prizes, and the prizes could be similar to those won from the bug catching contest. The consolation prize could be an apricorn of random color. The third place prize could be a berry juice. The second place prize could be a big pearl, and the first place prize could be an evolutionary stone. But I'm gonna make a change to the bug catching contest real quick since these two mini games would be kinda similar. I'd like to make the winning prize for the bug catching contest either a leaf stone on Tuesdays, a thunderstone on Thursdays, or a sunstone on Saturdays. That would give the player more reasons to replay the bug catching contest. And the Cyanwood City Fishing Tourney's first place prizes would be a Moonstone on Mondays, a Waterstone on Wednesdays, and a Firestone on Fridays. This would allow the player to evolve their Pokemon that require an evolutionary stone before reaching Kanto, and incentivize the player to revisit Cyanwood and replay the fishing tourney. Next, let's talk about Mahogany Town. There's already some stuff going on here, so I don't think it requires much improvement, but I have an idea as to how it can be improved so that the player will want to visit this quaint little town again. So, in Pokemon Crystal exclusively, the player will occasionally get a call from Camper Todd about a rooftop sale happening at the Goldenrod department store. Well, Goldenrod already has plenty of reasons to visit, but Mahogany could use an occasional sale. After the player defeats Team Rocket at the HQ, the Shady Souvenir Shop will be under new management by an elderly woman. Now, she claims to carry items that can't be found anywhere else, but let's be real. She carries standard Pokemart items, which is kind of fitting because Mahogany Town doesn't have a Pokemart in it, so somebody's gotta provide the trainer with some items. However, I do think that her merchandise should go on sale from time to time so that trainers can buy these Pokemart items at a cheaper price, and this will essentially incentivize the player to revisit Mahogany Town every once in a while. But I also think once a week she could obtain new wares that rotate out on Thursdays or something. I think she should carry the Rage Candy Bar every day, but the rotating wares could be Bright Powder, the Polka Dot Bow, which powers up normal moves, Silver Powder, Soft Sand, and the Twisted Spoon in Gen 2, since they can't be easily obtained elsewhere. And in Gen 4, she could rotate out the incense items that are currently only available in Kanto, like the Luck Incense, the Odd Incense, the Rock Incense, the Rose Incense, and the Sea Incense. I feel like I've said the word incense way too many times. Finally, let's discuss Blackthorn City. Personally, I don't think Blackthorn requires much improvement, except for maybe one slight thing. The man that offers you an in-game trade there will give you a Dodrio in exchange for a Dragonair. And that's a crap trade, alright? He is a scammer. All right, no way I'm trading my Dragonair for a damn Dodrio, not in a million years. But maybe instead of that, for players that don't have anyone to trade with, maybe instead we could have him offer you a trade evolution Pokemon each day of the week until you've obtained them all. For example, he'll trade you either a Haunter or an Onix on Sunday, a Machoke on Monday, a Kadabra on Tuesday, a Poliwhirl on Wednesday, a Porygon on Thursday, a Graveler on Friday, and a Scyther on Saturday. This would ultimately allow the player to obtain a Gengar, a Steelix, a Machamp, an Alakazam, a Politoed, a Porygon 2, a Golem, and a Caesar. The only issue is that a few of these Pokemon require held items in addition to the trade in order to evolve. So maybe the player will have to provide him with the held items in advance. And for those that don't require an item for evolution, maybe he'll request some other rare item from around the region. Either way, he'll return those items to you along with the traded Pokemon. Y'all comment down below which items y'all think those should be, and if it could even be implemented in both Gen 2 and Gen 4. I think if Johto just added those few small changes to the cities and towns mentioned, that could easily bring up the scores for both generations to a perfect 5. Honestly, not all of these ideas would have to be implemented, but I just think that there's so much to do in Johto, and these cities and towns deserve just a little bit more love and reasons to revisit. The next category that didn't exactly receive a perfect score of 5 would be Johto's Traversability and Transportation. Honestly, I struggled to determine ways that this could be fixed or improved. Mostly because the issue that I had with this category is due to the technical limitations of the time of the game's release, and that the methods of traversability and transportation just simply feel dated. And to be fair, it really isn't the transportation aspect of Johto that I have an issue with, it's really more so to do with traversability. I specifically have an issue with the very inefficient HMs that require you to build your team around their necessary usage. And that's just how it goes sometimes, you know? Outdated ways of traveling the region impact the way I and many other people feel about traveling across the region, and I'm not withholding scrutiny just because the games are a product of their time. Newer games are supposed to make quality of life improvements, and thankfully, Pokemon has improved its traversal methods in newer games by adding stuff like ride Pokemon or bikes that perform multiple functions and so on. That doesn't mean that the way we're currently able to traverse Johto is inherently bad, it just means that it doesn't feel as good as it used to, and quite frankly, it doesn't really need improvement. When I suggest improvements to these games, I try to think of ways that certain aspects can be improved upon using the technology that was available at the time. And sure, making the character move faster in a game would be totally feasible given the technology in either generations, but what better way could be implemented to achieve that in Johto? I mean, we could add the running shoes in Gen 2, but the running shoes simply hadn't been invented by the time the Gen 2 games came out, and, you know, roller skates weren't a thing until Gen 6, so do I suggest improvements to the games that simply hadn't been conceptualized at the time of the game's creation? Maybe. I mean, I did just suggest that a man in Blackthorn trade the player a Pokemon every day for a week, and the player would have to give him the items necessary to complete the trade evolution, and I don't think that that idea specifically has been implemented in any Pokemon game. So with that logic, I should just be able to say, add the roller skates, Rotom Bike, or Ride Pokemon to Gen 2 and Gen 4 and just take HMs out entirely. But for some reason, that just feels really wrong. Like, sure, in Gen 4, I guess the player could ride their following Pokemon depending on the species, but then the sizes of the sprites would need to change, and I don't know, that just feels really wrong too. I mean, HMs just kind of feel baked into the cake, you know? But as one of those outdated ingredients like lard or something. Not a whole lot of people cook with lard anymore. But to get that old school recipe just right, you've got to use an ingredient that we don't really use anymore, and not using lard in this old school recipe kind of changes the whole thing to look and taste very different to what was intended. And for Johto, HMs were simply intended to be there, and at this point in time, that's just what the recipe for the Johto experience calls for, and having it any other way would just feel wrong to me, even though lard and HMs aren't exactly my preferred ingredients for a perfect region. So basically, changing Johto's traversability methods at this time doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and the category will just have to stick with the scores it has for now. Y'all leave me some comments down below if you have any ideas for changing Johto's traversability methods from the running shoes, the bike, and HMs to something better. Personally, most of the time, I just run around with the running shoes in Gen 4 because I like seeing my Pokemon follow behind me. But I'm really interested to hear what y'all come up with, or if you agree or disagree with the points I've made here. Personally, I think I talked about lard for way too long. Moving on to the next category that requires repair, exploratory incentives. Okay, well technically only Gen 2 needs improvement in this area, as it received a score of 4, while Gen 4 received a perfect score of 5, but this one is kind of a simple fix. We could just give Johto its own safari zone on the eastern side of Cyanwood City, similar to HGSS, and just leave the one in Fuchsia City closed. This would not only give the player more reasons to explore Johto a little bit, but also incentivize the player to return to Cyanwood City. I would also make Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres roaming legendaries, and give the player the opportunity to catch Mewtwo. Those few extra exploratory incentives would help bring the score for Gen 2 up to a perfect score of 5. Next, we're going to discuss a category that really needs some severe fixing, and that's Johto's Pokemon diversity. Yeah, I had quite a few issues with this category. It's important to note that the number of new Pokemon that are introduced with the regions does not really matter to me, only how available they are to the player. New Pokemon that made their debut with the region should be available in the region, and this is a very key and important aspect to the games in my opinion. I mean, not all of the new Pokemon need to be everywhere in the region, but the majority of them should be available during a standard playthrough of the region prior to the post-game, and a decent chunk of them should be accessible. The issues that I have with Johto are that the region is very heavily dominated by Kanto Pokemon, and roughly 15 out of the new 100 Johto Pokemon aren't accessible until you've reached Kanto, and the Pokemon that are sequestered to Kanto have middling stats and aren't particularly useful by the time you obtain them in the game. I think that the majority of the Johto Pokemon that are exclusively found in Kanto are better suited to the mid-game of a Johto playthrough, not the post-game. There are also a few Pokemon that aren't available in Johto until you've reached Route 45, one of the last routes you'll travel down in the games, and I think that they should be available elsewhere too, just maybe with a lower encounter rate. The Gen 4 games had every opportunity to improve upon these aspects and simply didn't, so both Gen 2 and Gen 4 require improvement in this area. So let's talk about how we can fix these issues. As far as the availability of Johto Pokemon is concerned, I think that Game Freak did a really good job of trying to incentivize the player to utilize the new mechanics like the day-night cycle, headbutt trees, and the Pokegear, which allows the player to register the phone numbers of other trainers around the region who will alert the player when they encounter swarms of certain species of Johto Pokemon. In keeping with this theme, I think all of the games should take a page out of Pokemon Crystal's book by allowing the player to encounter Teddiursa in the mornings in Dark Cave, Vampy in the mornings on Route 46, and a higher encounter rate for Snubbull on routes 34 and 35 during the mornings and daytime, and Sneasel in the Ice Path at nighttime. In addition to that, the odd eggs should also be available from the daycare in all of the games as well, making the baby Pokemon more accessible. Plus, if you can get an egg from the daycare folks, I'm sure you could have Primo in the Violet City Pokemon Center in the Gen 2 games as well. And he can give you eggs for Slugma, Mareep, and Wooper. That way the player can obtain a Slugma fairly easily. As for the Pokemon that are locked behind Kanto, I say that Misdreavus should be found at nighttime in both the Burn Tower and the Bell/Tin Tower at nighttime with like a 25% encounter rate. Houndours should be available on routes 36 and 37 south of Ecruteak at nighttime with the same encounter rate as Growlithe or Vulpix found during the day. I say Murkrow should be found at night on routes 36, 37, and 42 in either the tall grass or in headbutt trees, and in the headbutt trees in the Ilex Forest as well. The only evolutionary lines that I think could stay locked behind the post-game would be the pseudo-legendary Tyranitar line and Chansey and Blissey. Also, it turns out that in HGSS, Quillfish is actually available in Route 32 with a good rod, but it only has a 2% encounter rate, so I did kind of get that fact wrong in the region review, but I did make a pinned comment, so do be sure to read the pinned comments on my videos, because sometimes I make corrections there. Anyway, I say that we make that Pokemon accessible in all of the games, make it a 2% encounter rate with the old rod, and like a 30% encounter rate with the good rod, and I'm happy. The other swarm Pokemon can still have their same availability with the swarms, only make these specific swarms available before the post game in HGSS as well. I also think that the Kanto Pokemon availability should be toned down in lieu of more Johto Pokemon availability. Essentially, let's just replace some of the Kanto Mons with some more Johto Mons and increase their encounter rates, and boom, easy perfection in that area. This could be done by having Sunkern available in routes 29, 30, and 31 in addition to National Park. Marill should be available on routes 32 and 34 in place of Rattata. Smeargle should replace Pidgey in routes 36 and 37. Gligar could be found in Mount Mortar in place of Rattata. Skarmory could be found on routes 38 and 39 in place of Rattata and even Raticate, only at a decreased encounter rate and an increased encounter rate of Miltank and Snubbull. Sneasel should be available across all the games in Ice Path at night, and I think with those changes, we could pretty much perfect Johto's Pokemon diversity. Using these methods, I think you'll easily be able to encounter many more Johto Pokemon, and they'll be in areas that make sense for their viability in the games. With this type of Johto Pokemon diversity, I can easily see Johto getting a perfect score of 5 in this category. Next, let's talk about another severely problematic category for Johto, the Gym Leaders, Elite Four, and Trainer classes. And we can start by getting the Trainer classes out of the way. I think that the Trainer classes are pretty good for Johto, even though I'm not particularly a fan of the Fire Breathers and Jugglers for Johto specifically. They really aren't the worst thing to happen to Johto, and I'm not dying on the hill of getting rid of them or anything. So the Trainer classes can stay the way they are. The main issue that I have with Johto in this category is that the Johto Pokemon representation is lacking quite a bit here, and it's disappointing since these folks are supposed to represent the most powerful trainers in Johto. It may seem trivial to some, but it's important to me that the gym leaders at least attempt to show off the new Johto Pokemon as well as the Elite Four and Champion. However, the Elite Four isn't way too bad either. I mean, I actually quite like Johto's Elite Four. It shares the Indigo Plateau with Kanto, and it does a good job at representing both sides for the most part. However, I think Will should trade one of his Xatu for a Girafarig, and it would make me kind of happy to see Karen get a Tyranitar, though her team is pretty decent the way it is. Koga's team is perfect, and I love it. And I also love the bits of lore about his daughter Janine taking over for him at his old gym in Fuchsia City in Kanto. But Bruno, on the other hand, was not the best fit for the Johto Elite Four, if you ask me. In the Johto Region review, I suggested that maybe he be replaced by someone like Misty with a team of Starmie, Quagsire, Lantern, Politoed, and Golduck. I just think she's a better fit since Johto introduced a lot of new water types, and she could keep her more reputable Kantomons as well. But the real issue I have with this category is the gym leaders. Here's the deal. Johto has some very memorable and awesome gym leaders, and I love their locations and their inclusion in the games. I wouldn't want them any other way, except their teams. Their teams gotta change. Their teams are crap for Johto Pokemon diversity, and it makes me angry. Let's give Falkner a Hoot Hoot and a Murkrow, alright? I get it. In the games, he's supposed to be using his daddy's bird Pokemon. But let's be real, daddy's birds are old news. It's time for Falkner to shine in his own way as a Johto gym leader with Johto Pokemon of his own. Next, we've got Bugsy, who had a buffet of new Johto bug types to choose from, and instead he goes with Metapod, Kakuna, and Scyther. Absolute madness, okay? I believe he's supposed to have gotten his bugs from the bug catching contest, and I really like Scyther's inclusion on his team to represent this. However, I made a pretty solid point, if I do say so myself, in the region review, that he passed up a Yanma on the way there. Literally, Yanma is found with a 1% encounter rate on Route 35 south of National Park. If Bugsy really is the best bug-type trainer in Johto, good enough to be a freaking gym leader, I think giving him a Yanma just proves how proficient he is at catching bugs, don't you think? Plus, he's located right next to the Ilex Forest, so I think a Pineco would also make sense for his team. And of course, you could replace any of his team members with the litany of Johto bug types. I just think Pineco, Yanma, and Scyther make for a solid Bugsy squad as the second gym leader. Comment down below which bug types you think Bugsy should have. Next up is Whitney. I love the fact that she uses a Miltank, and her Clefairy also kind of matches her cute vibe, so I actually really like her team. But I would also give her an additional Teddiursa. Someone had mentioned that I should check out a ROM hack that fixed a lot of these issues, and they also talked about her having a Teddiursa in that game, and I really like that idea, so I'm adopting it into the region repair. And, you know, even if we didn't change Whitney's team, I mean, I'd be pretty okay with that. Next, let's fix Morty's team. He's got 2 Haunters on his team, and not a single Misdreavus. So let's just replace one of them with a Misdreavus that he could find in my revised version of Johto in the Burned Tower. Perfect. On to Chuck. I think we let him keep his Poliwrath, replace his Primeape with a Hitmontop, and give him an additional Heracross, and his team is fixed. Next up is Jasmine, my favorite gym leader of Johto, and she uses a really awesome Steelix, which I adore, but she's also got 2 freaking Magnemite, and I hate it so much I have no words. How about we evolve one of those Magnemites into a Magneton and replace the other one with a Skarmory, and we're back in business, baby. I love this new team of hers. Let's move on to Price. He uses a Piloswine on his team as his ace, and I like that a lot. He can keep the Dugong, I guess, but let's replace that extra over-leveled Seal with either a Sneasel or a Delibird, and I'm pretty content with this team. Finally, let's talk about Claire. I don't really know what to do about her team, honestly. I talked about this in the review, but I think her team of Gyarados, 2 Dragonair, and a Kingdra is about as good as we're gonna get, so it stays the way it is, I guess. Even if my personal gym leader teams for Johto aren't perfect, I think they're a hell of a lot better than what they were before, and I think that they provide an additional challenge to the player, and I think that they would improve upon the Johto Pokemon representation in the region. And with these changes added, I could definitely see Johto getting a perfect score of 5 in this category. The final category that we will be covering in this region repair is naturally occurring phenomena. In Gen 2, this category kind of has the same issues that the Traversability and Transportation category had, you know, as far as technical limitations are concerned. It just kind of doesn't feel right to say that Gen 2 should have had weather and seasons. when those mechanics just simply didn't exist yet. It's one thing for them to already exist and not be included. It's totally different when the game's released before the mechanic's conception. Unfortunately, I think Gen 2 Johto has already received the highest score it possibly can in this category without having unrealistic expectations towards the technological limitations of its time. Gen 2 is just gonna have to stick with its score of 3.5 in this category, but I'm giving it my honorary Marsh badge of approval here. This score is perfectly acceptable for Gen 2. However, Gen 4 can absolutely be improved by giving more areas in the games the chance for rainy weather outside of just Route 33 and the Lake of Rage. I say the entire region of Johto should be given the chance for rain, since Johto has standing puddles of water and ponds and small lakes all over the region. I mean, this region is supposed to be more wet than Kanto, so where's the rain at? I'll be honest, I'm not really sure how the developers created the rain systems in the Pokemon games, but I'm sure they could have worked out an RNG rain day system so that when the day changed, each route, city, and town would essentially roll to see whether or not it would rain in that area, and if so, it would rain for the remainder of the day until the following day. I'm sure that an algorithm could be made to determine how likely or unlikely it would be to rain depending on the location, but honestly, what do I know? I've never developed a game before, and I'm purely speculating based on limited knowledge here, and I don't claim to be educated on this stuff. This is just an idea, but I still think the developers, at the time, could have created a system like this with the technology that they had. In addition to rain, I think it should snow on routes like 44 and 45 near the ice path and Blackthorn City. It would also kind of be nice to see some snowy patches on the ground when it does snow as well. And that essentially fixes the issues that I had with the lack of weather in Gen 4 Johto. As far as seasons are concerned, they kinda hadn't been invented in the games until Gen 5. So instead, let's just give Johto a few more seasonal areas. I say we make all of Ecruteak look autumnal, like the Bell Chime Trail, and oh my gosh, that would be so awesome, right? As stated previously, with the changes to Blackthorn City and the surrounding snowy routes 44 and 45, we could kinda have a wintry theme. Finally, I think more standing puddles of water like those in Route 34 could be added to some of the other routes, in addition to more flowers and lighter shades of green grass and trees. With that, I think we could get something resembling spring, and the remaining routes can stay the way they are to represent summer. It isn't a perfect system, but it's the best I can recommend for what I believe about the technology of the Gen 4 era. And with these changes applied, I think I could comfortably give Gen 4 Johto a perfect score of 5 in the naturally occurring phenomena category. And that covers all of the repairs that could be made to Johto to make it as perfect as possible. But let's be honest here, Johto is pretty freaking great the way it is right now. And I'll always continue to find myself returning to Johto, even with its flaws that are kind of few and far between. Some issues are pretty major, like the Pokemon diversity and the Johto Pokemon representation amongst its gym leaders, and all over the region, quite frankly. But most of the issues are fairly minor. And some issues that I have with Johto kinda don't really need fixing at all, as they're not really broken, they're just kinda outdated. And replacing some of the older mechanics, like those with Johto's Traversability and Transportation with the mechanics of the newer games, for some reason just does not feel right to me. But frankly, I don't really see those remaining issues really hindering me from enjoying Johto to its absolute fullest. But I will admit that if the Johto region had been repaired using some of the suggestions that I made in this video, I really think we could consider Johto to be a perfect region, and it would receive a score of 5 out of 5. What did you think of my region repairs for Johto? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know if there's something I haven't considered, and let me know how you would repair the region of Johto. And if you liked this video and found found it entertaining, make sure to leave me a like on this video. And if you'd like to see more content like this from me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Plus, if you want to be notified whenever I upload videos, and I upload pretty randomly for my mental healths, you might want to hit that bell icon so that you get notified whenever I upload. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in to these region repairs of Johto, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye!